My name is Elena Hart, and if I'm being honest, I should have left Noah the night he humiliated me in front of his friends. Not later, not after I had time to think, not after I replayed the moment in bed beside him while he slept like nothing had happened. I should have left that exact night, the second I heard the contempt in his voice and saw how easily everyone around him joined in. Because that was the moment everything became clear. What happened at that dinner wasn't a joke that landed badly. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the truth slipping out in public before he had the chance to clean it up. He didn't respect me. Not as a woman, not as his partner, and definitely not as someone he was proud to stand beside. The worst part was that I went to that dinner for him. Noah had insisted we go to his friend Sabrina's apartment that night. It was one of those polished, upper-middle-class gatherings where everyone arrived with expensive wine, practiced smiles, and stories designed to sound effortless. Promotions, bonuses, new apartments, last-minute trips, startup gossip. All of it floated through the room in that glossy, exhausting way people use when they want admiration without asking for it directly. I never liked those nights. I could survive them, but I never liked them. Still, I went because Noah wanted me there, or at least I thought he did. At first, everything felt normal. Glasses clinked. Someone lit a candle that smelled too expensive to be real. Sabrina was in the kitchen retelling some overdramatic story about a luxury trip that had apparently been ruined by the wrong marble in the bathroom. People laughed too hard. Noah stayed close enough to look affectionate, his hand drifting to my back now and then, like he was performing the role of a good boyfriend for an audience. And I played along. I smiled when I needed to. I nodded through the career talk. I let the night move the way those nights always moved. Shallow conversation layered over quiet competition. Then, somewhere between the second bottle of wine and another recycled conversation about ambition, one of Sabrina's friends turned to Noah and asked, "So what does Elena do again?" I didn't even look up at first. That's how little I expected what came next. I assumed he would say what he usually said in public, something vague but respectful. Something like, "She works in corporate operations," or "She's in finance strategy." Just enough to acknowledge that I had built a real career and worked hard for it. But Noah smiled. Not warmly, not proudly. He smirked. Then he swirled the wine in his glass and let out a soft, amused laugh that made something in my stomach tighten before he even opened his mouth. "Oh, Elena," he said. "She just sits in a tiny cubicle all day pushing papers around. Very thrilling stuff." The room broke into laughter. Not polite laughter, real laughter. Sabrina threw her head back. Another woman covered her mouth and said, "Stop, that's awful," while laughing anyway. One of the men leaned in and asked, "Wait, so she's basically the office version of beige?" And Noah laughed harder. He took another sip of wine and said, "I mean, kind of. She's great if you need a spreadsheet done while the rest of the world is out making actual moves." More laughter. For 1 second, I honestly couldn't feel my hands. It wasn't just the words. I've heard worse. It was the ease of it, the instinct, the way the mockery rolled out of him so naturally, like he had made that joke in his head 100 times and had simply been waiting for the right audience. That was what hurt. Because men who love you don't look at you like that. They don't reduce your life to a punchline just because it earns them a few laughs over wine and candlelight. I could have said something. I had every right to. I could have looked him dead in the eye and asked whether the apartment he loved sleeping in each night was paid for by that tiny cubicle job. I could have reminded the table that boring women with spreadsheets often end up cleaning up the disasters left behind by louder, flashier people. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. I lifted my glass, took a slow sip, and leaned back in my chair like none of it mattered. "Yeah," I said lightly, "just my glamorous little cubicle life." For the briefest second, Noah looked at me. Something flickered across his face. Satisfaction, maybe. Relief. Maybe he thought he had won some small private contest by proving he could belittle me, and I would still sit there calm, agreeable, and safe. That was his mistake, because what he saw as weakness was actually the moment I stopped belonging to him. The rest of the night passed in a blur of laughter, polished countertops, expensive shoes by the door, and people talking too loudly about themselves. I answered when spoken to. I even smiled at the right moments. But inwardly, something had gone quiet in me. Not broken, quiet. The kind of silence that comes right before a door closes for good. By the time we got home, Noah was relaxed, almost cheerful. He kissed my forehead like he had done nothing wrong, asked if I was tired. moved around the apartment with that easy confidence people have when they think they still understand the person beside them. I looked at him and realized he had no idea what had changed, and I let him keep thinking that. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't ask why he said it. I didn't demand an apology. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I did something far more dangerous. I acted normal. If anything, I became gentler. I asked him if he wanted tea before bed. I kissed him goodnight. The next morning, I made breakfast like always. Over the next several days, I stayed soft enough that he wouldn't suspect what had shifted beneath the surface. Because by then, I already knew two things. First, I was going to leave him. Second, he had no idea my life was about to change in a way that would make his little joke look pathetic. For the last 6 months, my company had been restructuring quietly. There had been internal meetings, private evaluations, and closed-door conversations, the kind that never show up on public calendars until everything is already decided. While Noah was busy reducing my work to a punchline, I had been working directly with senior leadership on projects he never even knew existed. My so-called boring cubicle job was about to become something very different. A bigger title, a bigger salary, a completely different level of influence. And the most important part? The role was across the country. I had known for weeks that I was the top candidate. My director had nearly said it outright. But I never told Noah, because deep down, I knew exactly what would happen if he found out before everything was official. The same man who mocked me in public would suddenly start looking at me with respect again. He'd become sweeter, more attentive, more careful. He would adjust, not because he truly valued me, but because he'd realize I was becoming the kind of woman people compete for. And I refused to let him perform love just because my value had changed. So I said nothing. I smiled. I stayed warm. I let him believe I was exactly where he had left me that night. Quiet, safe, available. Meanwhile, inside me, the ending had already begun. For the next 2 weeks, I became the easiest woman in the world to underestimate. Noah thought if I wasn't yelling, I wasn't hurt. If I wasn't crying, I hadn't noticed. If I was still sleeping beside him, still answering his texts, still asking whether he wanted pasta or takeout after work, then whatever had happened at Sabrina's apartment had blown over. He mistook my calm for forgiveness. In reality, it was distance, not the obvious kind. I wasn't stupid enough to turn cold overnight. Men like Noah notice dramatic changes because drama makes them feel important. What they don't notice are quiet withdrawals, a laugh that arrives half a second later than it used to, fewer volunteered thoughts, fewer pieces of myself offered up freely. I gave him just enough of me to keep him comfortable. That was the trick. I kissed him before work. I sent him texts during the day. I went out with him once and smiled through it. He relaxed fast, which told me more than any apology could have. Because he never apologized. Not really. 3 nights after the dinner party, he was leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone when he glanced up and said, "You know everyone was just joking the other night, right?" I was rinsing a wine glass. I kept my eyes on the sink. "Of course," I said. He nodded like that settled it. That was it. No remorse. No embarrassment. No, I'm sorry I disrespected you in a room full of people. Just a casual little line tossed into the air, like I should be grateful he had acknowledged it at all. I remember drying my hands slowly and thinking, this man really believes the problem is my sensitivity, not his character. And that was when leaving him stopped feeling emotional and started feeling necessary. Once I made that decision, I became sharper. Not cruel, not reckless, just clear. I noticed everything. The way Noah's tone changed depending on who was in the room, the way he spoke about women he admired versus women he assumed would stay. The way he loved the appearance of stability more than the responsibility of building it. And I noticed something else. He was shifting. At first, it was subtle. More time on his phone. More absences that didn't quite line up. A distracted energy at dinner. The kind of half-listening men do when their attention is already somewhere else, but they still want to be seen as present. Then came the name, Vanessa. The first time he mentioned her, it was casual. We were on the couch with some forgettable show playing in the background, and he said, "There's a new woman on our team, Vanessa. You'd actually like her. She's intense in a funny way." I made a neutral sound and kept my eyes on the television. The second time, he was nodding his tie in the mirror. "Vanessa just got recruited from a competitor," he said. "She's sharp, like really sharp." Again, I said nothing that mattered. The third time, he made sure it landed. We were out for drinks, just the two of us, and he laughed into his glass before saying, "Vanessa bought a new car last week, fully loaded. She's got that kind of drive, real ambition." Then he looked at me. Not directly enough to be called out, Just enough. I smiled faintly. Sounds like she's doing well. That seemed to disappoint him. I think he wanted jealousy, or insecurity, or some sign that I understood the comparison he was laying down so carefully between us. But by then, I understood perfectly. Vanessa wasn't the issue. What mattered was that Noah needed me to know there were other women in the world he found more exciting than the one already standing beside him. He wanted me off balance, eager to prove my worth, a little more willing to work for scraps of approval. What he didn't know was that the woman he was trying to destabilize had already stepped mentally out of the relationship. So every time he brought Vanessa up, all he really did was confirm I was making the right choice. At the same time, my real life was moving forward in ways he couldn't imagine. Work had become a quiet storm. For months, the company had been reorganizing leadership across divisions, merging departments, shifting budgets, and identifying who could handle more. It started with closed-door meetings, then expanded into strategy reviews, performance evaluations, and private conversations with people whose names didn't usually appear on ordinary internal email chains. My role had changed before the title ever did. I was in rooms I had never been invited into before, asked for input by executives who had barely known my name a year earlier, trusted with decisions that affected teams larger than Noah understood existed. One Thursday afternoon, my director asked me to step into her office. Her name was Andrea Bell, and she had the kind of stillness that made everybody else sit straighter without knowing why. She closed the door behind me, motioned for me to sit, and folded her hands on the desk. "We're almost there," she said. I knew exactly what she meant, but I kept my face neutral. All right. The executive team signed off on the expansion plan this morning. The new regional role is being finalized. Officially, I'm not supposed to confirm anything until HR processes the paperwork. She paused. Unofficially, Elena, if you still want it, this position is yours. I should say I reacted dramatically. I didn't. I just sat there very still while something electric moved through my chest. Because moments like that don't always feel loud when they arrive. Sometimes they feel almost sacred, like your whole life quietly opening a door and waiting to see whether you're brave enough to walk through it. What's the timeline? I asked. Andrea's mouth curved slightly. Fast. We'd want you in the new office within 3 weeks. 3 weeks, I nodded once. Then yes, I want it. She held my gaze. Good, I thought you would. When I left her office, the hallway looked the same as it always had. Same carpet, same muted walls, same hum of printers and footsteps, but none of it felt the same to me anymore. Because now it was real. The promotion, the relocation, the salary jump, the authority, the clean geographic break from the man who had laughed while reducing my life to office furniture. I didn't tell Noah that night. I came home, changed out of my work clothes, and found him in the kitchen scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up when I walked in. Long day? He asked. A little, I said. He nodded and returned to the screen. That moment told me everything. If I had walked into that apartment glowing, ready to tell the man I loved that my career had just changed forever, I would have been offering something precious into careless hands. So I kept it. He didn't deserve early access to the best part of my future. And more than that, I understood him too well. If Noah found out I was about to become more successful, his whole posture would change. He would suddenly turn attentive in all the ways he had withheld. He would start asking about my meetings. He would talk about how proud he was. He would frame my win as our win. He would tell people he had always believed in me. But it would be strategy, not love. So I made a decision. I would say nothing until everything was irreversible. No hints, no excited confession, no warning in my tone that he was about to lose the woman he had worked so hard to undervalue. Instead, I became even easier to take for granted. I cooked dinner twice that week. I asked about his meetings. I even listened while he complained about a manager at work and pretended to care more than I did. When he touched me, I let him. When he kissed me, I kissed him back with just enough softness to keep him blind. And every time he looked satisfied, I felt calmer, because he still believed he had time. He still believed I was where he had left me. He still believed that if Vanessa turned out not to be as interested as he hoped, or if life became inconvenient, or if he wanted reassurance and comfort from someone grounded, I would still be there. He thought I was his safety net. What he didn't understand was that I had already cut the ropes. One night, about a week after Andrea's confirmation, Noah walked in from work with that loose, self-satisfied energy he always had when he thought the world was tilting in his favor. He tossed his keys on the counter and said, "Vanessa got invited to lead a client pitch. Pretty impressive. She knows how to make people pay attention." I was standing at the stove stirring sauce. "Does she?" I asked calmly. He shrugged and opened the fridge. Some people just have that thing. Presence. Hunger. They're not content doing the same small, safe routine forever. There it was. Not even subtle anymore. I turned the burner down and looked over my shoulder at him. He was pretending to study the shelves in the fridge, but I could see the expectation in his posture, waiting for me to react, to defend myself, to ask whether he was talking about me. Instead, I smiled. I'm sure that kind of hunger comes with its own costs, I said. Then I turned back to the stove. The silence behind me stretched a little too long. When I glanced at him again, his expression had changed, only slightly. Confusion, maybe. Unease. As if for one flicker of a second, he sensed something shifting under his feet and couldn't name it. Good. That was the first moment I think he felt it. Not the truth, not yet. Just the draft from a door he didn't realize was already open. And by then, I was no longer wondering whether I could leave. I was planning exactly how. Once you decide to leave someone for real, everything becomes a process. Not emotional, not dramatic. Procedural. That's the part people don't talk about. They think endings are loud. Arguments, tears, doors slamming. But the most permanent endings happen quietly. In spreadsheets, in canceled subscriptions, in passwords changed, and conversations that never happen. By the time Noah realized anything was wrong, I wanted him already standing in the aftermath. So I started small. The first thing I did was separate what he had gotten used to sharing without ever acknowledging. Our finances had never been fully merged, but there were overlaps. Convenience payments, transfers that happened automatically every month, rent contributions adjusted casually without discussion, streaming services, small comforts that made his life smoother without him ever needing to think about them. I removed myself from all of it. No announcements, no explanations, just quiet disconnections. I canceled the shared subscriptions first. Netflix, Spotify, a couple of smaller ones he probably didn't even realize I was paying for. Then I stopped the automatic transfers. Rent would be his responsibility now. Utilities, too. I made sure everything was clean, traceable, and legally uncomplicated. I wasn't trying to trap him. I was removing myself. Next came the apartment. The lease was in both our names, but I handled most of the communication with the landlord. I reached out privately, explained that I would be relocating for work, and asked about early termination options. There were fees, of course, paperwork, conditions. I agreed to all of it. Freedom costs something. I was fine paying it. What I didn't do was tell Noah. Not yet, because timing matters. If you warn someone like him too early, they don't reflect. They react. They scramble. They perform. They say whatever version of themselves they think will keep you in place. I didn't want a performance. I wanted him sitting comfortably in a reality that no longer included me. So I let him. On the surface, nothing changed. I still came home at the same time. Still moved through the apartment like it was ours. Still asked whether he wanted dinner. Still listened when he talked. But inside, everything was shifting. I was stepping back, piece by piece, until there was almost nothing left of me in the relationship. Emotionally, I went first. There's a specific kind of intimacy you have with someone you love, not just physical, but mental. The way you lean toward them without thinking. The way you feel silence. The way you offer small details of your day because you want to be known. I stopped doing that, not abruptly, gradually. I answered instead of sharing. Listened instead of engaging. Smiled instead of reacting. I became pleasant, easy, undemanding. And because Noah had never actually been paying attention to who I was beneath the surface, he didn't notice the difference between presence and absence. He just noticed that things felt smooth, which to him meant everything was fine. If anything, he became more relaxed, more careless. A week into my quiet exit, I overheard something that confirmed exactly how he saw me. He was in the living room, pacing slowly with his phone pressed to his ear. I had just stepped out of the bedroom and paused when I heard my name. Elena's sweet, he was saying. Like, she's solid. She's not going anywhere. A pause, then a laugh. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's comfortable. I don't have to think about it. I stood there in the hallway, just out of sight, listening to the man I had spent years with reduce our relationship to convenience and predictability. Not love. Not partnership. Comfort. A safe option. A backup plan. Vanessa's different, he added a second later. I don't know. There's more energy there. More upside. More upside. I almost smiled, because that was the moment everything locked into place. He wasn't choosing between people. He was evaluating options, and I had already removed myself from the list. I walked into the kitchen deliberately, making enough noise for him to hear me. His voice shifted immediately, tone smoothing out, conversation wrapping up faster than it naturally would have. "Yeah, I'll call you later," he said quickly, then hung up. When he turned and saw me, he smiled like nothing had happened. "Hey," he said, "you're quiet tonight." "I'm just tired," I replied. He nodded, accepting that without question. That was the thing about Noah. He didn't investigate what didn't inconvenience him. Over the next few days, his behavior became even more transparent. He stopped hiding his phone, not because he was honest, but because he didn't think he needed to be careful. He assumed I was stable enough not to question him, that I trusted him enough not to look, that I was invested enough not to walk away. He started staying later at work. At least that was the explanation. Sometimes he came home energized in a way that had nothing to do with deadlines. Sometimes he was distracted, smiling at messages he didn't share. Sometimes he mentioned Vanessa again, casually, like she was just another detail in his day. But he said her name more often than he said mine. And still I didn't react. Not because I was suppressing emotion, because I didn't feel the need to. Meanwhile, my own life was accelerating. HR sent over the official documents 2 days after my meeting with Andrea. Offer letter, compensation breakdown, relocation package, start date, 3 weeks. That was all the time I had left in that apartment. I signed everything that same night, carefully, calmly, without hesitation. Then I opened a separate folder on my laptop and began organizing what needed to be done. Logistics, timeline, packing strategy, transfer of accounts, notifications that would go out after I was already gone. I booked movers under my name only and scheduled the pickup for a morning Noah would already be at work. I planned everything down to the hour, not because I was paranoid, because I was precise. The more controlled the exit, the cleaner the break. A few days before everything was set to happen, I made one final adjustment. I stopped talking about the future. No more next month we should, no more maybe we can plan, no more references to trips or events that implied continuity. At first, Noah didn't notice. Then he did. "You've been kind of off about planning stuff," he said one evening, leaning against the doorway while I was folding laundry. "Have I?" I asked lightly. "Yeah, you used to always be the one bringing things up." I shrugged. "I've just been focused on work." That answer satisfied him more than it should have. Work, to Noah, was something that filled time, not something that changed lives. "Right," he said. "Makes sense." And just like that, the conversation ended. No digging, no curiosity, no attempt to understand what focused on work actually meant for me. Because he still believed he had time. The final week before my departure, he was more relaxed than I had ever seen him. Confident, almost careless. He stopped pretending to hide his interest in Vanessa altogether, mentioned her freely, compared things openly, even joked once, "You'd get along with her if you tried." I remember looking at him and thinking, you really have no idea what's coming. The night before everything was set in motion, he fell asleep quickly. I stayed awake, not because I was sad, because I was clear. I lay there in the dark, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief, because in less than a week, this version of my life would be over. No more shrinking myself to fit someone else's expectations. No more pretending not to hear the disrespect hidden inside jokes. No more being evaluated against women he found more exciting. Just distance, just silence, just forward motion. And the best part? He still thought he was in control. He still thought I was his safety net. He still thought that if everything else failed, he could turn back to me and find everything exactly where he left it. But what happens when you step off a safety net that no longer exists? You fall. And Noah was about to learn that the hard way. The day everything collapsed for Noah didn't start with anything dramatic. It began quietly, the way real collapses usually do. By then, the decision was complete. My move had been finalized, my place in the new city was secured, and the last practical ties to our shared life were already being cut behind the scenes. Noah just didn't know it yet. That morning, he woke up the way he always did. Slow, comfortable, stretching like someone who had never once questioned whether the life around him would still be there when he opened his eyes. He reached for his phone, scrolled for a few minutes, then got up without urgency. Routine. That was his whole world. The first crack appeared in something so small he almost ignored it. He tried to order a ride to work. Payment declined. He frowned, tried again, and got the same result. A flicker of irritation. Then, like always, he switched to his own card. Problem solved. Morning saved. That was the kind of man Noah was. As long as there was an easy solution, he never questioned the system. By the time he got to work, the second crack had already formed. Maybe it was a service asking him to update payment details. Maybe it was the absence of some small convenience he had never had to think about before. Little frictions, little inconveniences. He ignored them. Of course he did, because Noah had built a life where things were always handled for him in the background. Around mid-morning, the thought came to him. He hadn't heard from me. No text, no check-in, no have a good day. For a second, he probably hesitated. Then he dismissed it. Busy, he told himself. Work. That was always the easy explanation. And he wasn't wrong. I was busy, just not in a way he understood. Because while he was sitting in that office believing the structure of his life was still intact, I was already in motion toward a completely different one. Later that morning, curiosity turned into action. He decided to come see me. Not because he missed me, not because he was worried, because he wanted reassurance. That I was still there, still predictable, still within reach. So he left his office, got into a car, and headed to my building with that same easy confidence he always carried. The confidence of someone who had never truly lost anything before. When he arrived, nothing felt unusual at first. Same building, same entrance, same receptionist. He moved through the space like he belonged there. Then he turned the corner toward my department, and everything stopped. My desk was empty, not messy, not temporarily abandoned. Gone. Cleared. Every trace of me removed like I had never been there at all. In my place sat someone else. Typing. Working. Existing in a space that had belonged to me just days before. Noah didn't move. For a second, his brain refused to process what he was seeing. Because this didn't fit into the reality he had constructed. I didn't disappear. I stayed. That was the pattern. That was the assumption he had built his entire behavior on. He stepped forward slowly, scanning the area like there had to be an explanation. Then a voice came from behind him. Looking for Elena? He turned. One of my former coworkers was standing there with a coffee, watching him with mild curiosity. Noah forced a smile. Yeah, he said. Do you know where she is? A pause. Then the answer that ended everything. She's gone. The word hit harder than it should have. Gone? Noah repeated. What do you mean gone? My coworker shrugged. She got promoted. Big role. Moved across the country. Left last week. Silence. Real silence. Noah blinked. His brain scrambled for something, anything, that made sense. That doesn't sound right, he said, letting out a short laugh that didn't land. She would have told me. The coworker gave him a look. Not cruel. Just honest. I mean, she said slowly, she seemed pretty busy with the transition. Maybe she didn't get the chance. That was the moment it hit him. Not the words, the implication. I hadn't forgotten to tell him. I had chosen not to. Everything that followed happened fast. Too fast for him to control. He pulled out his phone, opened our messages, and typed quickly. Hey, I just came by your office. I didn't know you were moving. Can we talk? He sent it and stared at the screen. Nothing. A minute passed. Then 2. Still nothing. His chest tightened. He called. Straight to voicemail. That's when the first real crack formed inside him. Not annoyance, not confusion. Fear. Because for the first time the pattern had broken. I wasn't responding. I wasn't available. I wasn't where he left me. He tried again. Voicemail. Another message. Elena, seriously, what's going on? No reply. That's when the realization started to take shape. The distance, the calm, the lack of reaction, the absence of future plans. All of it. Not weakness. Preparation. He had never been in control. Not at the end. Not when it mattered. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. One message. From me. He opened it instantly. Don't worry, Noah. I found a better opportunity. Then the line that finished it. You understand, right? His breath caught, because he recognized it. Not just the words, the tone, the meaning. I hadn't just left. I had mirrored him, thrown his own logic back at him, reduced everything he thought he had to the same dismissive simplicity he had used on me. And just like that, he understood enough to know this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the end. Noah didn't accept it right away. At first, he told himself there had to be an explanation, a reasonable one, something that would restore order and put him back in control of the narrative. That's what he clung to as he walked out of the building. Not reality. Possibility. He called again. Voicemail. He texted again. Elena, this isn't funny. Call me. Nothing. He stood there on the sidewalk for a long moment, staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. People moved around him. The noise of a normal day continuing exactly as it should, but none of it reached him the way it used to. Because something had shifted. For the first time, he wasn't the one deciding how things would play out. He got back into a car, but he didn't go straight home. He needed validation first. That was always his instinct. If something didn't make sense, he turned to other people to shape it into something he could accept. So he reached for the easiest place, his friends. Sabrina picked up on the second ring. You will not believe what just happened, he said, pacing the edge of the sidewalk. She sighed softly. What? Elena just left. Like actually left. New job, different city, didn't tell me anything. There was a pause on the line. Not shock, not confusion. Then, yeah. Noah frowned. Yeah? What does that mean? It means, Sabrina said, her voice flattening slightly. I'm not surprised. The words hit harder than he expected. What are you talking about? He asked, a defensive edge creeping in. She exhaled. Come on, Noah, you embarrassed her in front of everyone. You didn't just joke, you tore her down. And you didn't even apologize properly. He laughed once, short and sharp. It wasn't that serious. Wasn't it? She replied quietly. Silence. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Because somewhere underneath his instinct to defend himself, there was a memory. My face. Not reacting, not arguing. Just going still. Sabrina continued, softer now. You always assumed she'd stay. That's on you. The line went quiet, and for the first time, doubt slipped through the cracks. He ended the call quickly after that, brushing it off in his head. Sabrina was overreacting. She didn't understand the full picture. So he tried someone else. Marcus. Marcus answered with his usual distracted tone. Hey, you heard from Elena? Noah asked immediately. No, Marcus said. Why? She moved. Across the country. Didn't tell me. A beat. Then Marcus let out a low whistle. Damn. Yeah, damn, Noah snapped. That's it? What do you want me to say? Marcus replied. You kind of saw this coming, didn't you? No, I didn't, Noah said, sharper now. She never said anything. Marcus was quiet for a second. Then, she didn't have to. That landed worse than Sabrina's response. Because Marcus didn't say it with judgment. He said it like it was obvious. Like anyone paying attention would have seen it. Noah clenched his jaw. You're acting like I did something horrible. Marcus didn't rush to reassure him. Not horrible, he said finally. Just consistent. That word stuck. Consistent. Like this wasn't one mistake. Like this was a pattern. Noah ended the call after that. Too many conversations were going the same way. Too many people weren't giving him the reaction he expected. He had called looking for support. What he got instead was reflection, and he didn't like what it showed him. By the time he got home, the apartment felt different. Not empty. Not yet, but quieter. Like something essential had already been removed. He walked through it slowly, noticing things he had never paid attention to before. The absence of small details. A favorite mug, a jacket, a pair of shoes that used to sit near the door. He frowned. Had those always been gone? Or had he just never noticed when they disappeared? He moved into the bedroom and opened the closet. That's when it became undeniable. Half of it was empty. Not messy. Not disorganized. Deliberately cleared. A clean, intentional absence. That was when the truth finally settled in. Not all at once, but enough. I hadn't left suddenly. I had left slowly. And he hadn't seen any of it. His chest tightened. Not panic this time. Something heavier. Realization. Because now he could trace it backward. The calm. The distance. The lack of reaction. The missing conversations about the future. All of it had been there, right in front of him, and he had ignored it. Because he thought he had time. That night he tried again. Another message. Elena, can we please talk? I don't understand why you do this without saying anything. No reply. A few minutes later, another. If this is about the dinner, I said it was a joke. You're blowing it out of proportion. Still nothing. Hours passed. Silence stretched. And slowly, frustration turned into something else. Desperation. Because he could feel it now. Control slipping. The structure he relied on bending in ways he couldn't fix with charm or timing. By the next morning, he had called me more times than he would ever admit out loud. Everyone unanswered. Each one a small confirmation that this wasn't temporary. That I wasn't just upset. That I was gone. Completely. By the third day, Noah stopped pretending this was something he could fix quickly. That illusion didn't survive long without a response. At first, he paced through the apartment like the solution was just out of reach. Like one more call, one better message, one perfectly phrased apology would reset everything back to the way it was. But silence does something to people. It removes the illusion of influence. And Noah had built his identity on the belief that he could always steer things back in his favor. Now there was nothing to steer. No response to react to, no emotion to manipulate, no opening to step into. Just absence. He started with anger. That came naturally. I could picture it without seeing it. The way he would run a hand through his hair, pacing between the kitchen and the living room, replaying everything in his head, but editing it just enough to make himself look better. She didn't even tell me. That's not how normal people handle things. She's being dramatic. He probably said those things out loud. Not because he believed them completely, but because they were easier than admitting the truth. That I hadn't left suddenly. I had left carefully, deliberately, and he hadn't noticed. By the end of the first day, the anger didn't hold, because anger needs something to push against, and I wasn't there. So it turned into something quieter, something heavier, confusion at first, then doubt, then something he hadn't felt in a long time. Loss. He reached for his phone again that night. Another message. Elena, I'm serious. Can we just talk? No reply. He waited longer this time. Watched the screen like it might change its mind. It didn't. By the second day, the messages shifted. Less defensive. More careful. I know I messed up. That was new. He stared at the words for a long time before sending them. Because saying that meant acknowledging something he had been avoiding. That this wasn't random. That this was connected to him. Still no answer. The calls came after that. 1, 2, 5, 10. By the end of the day, he had called more times than he ever had in the entire length of our relationship. Every single one went to voicemail. That was the moment it started to sink in fully. Not just that I had left, but that I wasn't coming back. On the third day, the messages lost their structure completely. Please, Elena, just answer. I don't need anything. I just want to hear your voice. That last one stayed on his screen longer than the others, because even he could hear the difference. No confidence, no control, no performance. Just need. And that was something Noah had never been comfortable with. Not when it came from other people. And definitely not when it came from himself. I read that message. I won't pretend I didn't. I was sitting in my new apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows, a skyline I didn't recognize yet, a space that was entirely mine in a way the old one had never been. My phone lit up. His name, his words. I looked at them quietly. No anger, no satisfaction. Just clarity. Because I understood exactly what he meant when he said he missed me. He didn't miss me. Not really. He missed what I made possible. The stability, the certainty, the version of his life that ran smoothly because I was there holding it together behind the scenes. He missed the safety net, and now that it was gone, he was finally feeling the fall. I let the message sit there for a moment longer. Then I deleted it. No reply. No explanation. No closure. Because closure is something you give when there's mutual respect. And Noah had already shown me exactly how much of that existed between us. In the days that followed, the messages slowed. Not because he understood, but because he ran out of ways to reach me. His calls became less frequent, his texts shorter. Until eventually, nothing. Silence again. But this time it belonged to him, not me. From what I heard later, through people who still moved in the same circles, things didn't stabilize for him the way he expected. Vanessa lost interest. Turns out he was a lot more appealing when he looked like a man with options, not a man who had just been left behind. His friends? They moved on. They always do. People like Noah only stay interesting as long as they look like they're winning. And when that image cracks, the room gets quieter faster than you'd think. As for me, I didn't look back. Not because I was trying to prove something, but because there was nothing left to return to. That version of my life, the one where I sat quietly while someone reduced me to a joke, where I made myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger, where I stayed out of habit instead of respect. That version ended the night he laughed. Everything after that was just me catching up to the truth. Now, when I think about it, I don't remember the embarrassment as sharply as I thought I would. I remember the clarity, the exact moment I saw him for who he was, and the even more important moment when I chose myself instead. Because in the end, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about teaching him a lesson. It was about walking away from someone who only valued me when it was convenient, and doing it so completely that he didn't even realize I was gone until there was nothing left to come back to. And him? He's probably still trying to understand how he lost something he never thought he could. Me? I'm already somewhere he can't reach.